I want to start the second hour. We talked a lot about the Oregon-Indiana game, and I know that's not fun for everybody, given the final result.
Delightful time yesterday.
We danced around it, but I do want to talk about there's a couple things out there for me. I was thinking about Cignetti in Indiana and how remarkable the story is and just his journey to come from out of nowhere to year 2 Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Here they are, maybe on the doorstep of winning a national championship. And I think it's interesting. You can feel however you feel about what next year's teams are going to be, whoever you root for. But the big one for Oregon seems to be, well, next year was really supposed to be the year. And I don't know where you're at on this because we always change how we feel about stuff.
By the time you get to the Final Four, I'm not saying next year is the year. I'm saying, why can't this year be the year? You're one of the 4 teams remaining in the playoffs.
Okay, so I think that's an interesting thing. I think Duck fan largely believed that until everything kind of transpired last Friday.
Yeah.
And so now I'm hearing like, well, next year really is the year. And I understand why. They're going to have maybe, without knowing top of my head, all the 130-plus teams.
How dare you?
The best defensive line if everybody stays and doesn't enter the draft.
They should. If you coach them, develop them, and they all play to their level, they should be the best defensive line or one of the best defensive lines in the entire sport.
People are really high on that Hyatt kid. He came on late for them. And so what is he going to add to the wrinkle? So, like, there's a lot to be optimistic about, and we still don't know about Dante Moore yet.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of next year, playing the next year game, I find that to be a very dangerous game to play as a fan base. Because the only reason I say that, Dirt, isn't because Oregon can't win it next year. One, I think when you say that, it kind of sounds, not you, but the proverbial you, it comes off a little bit like an excuse for why you got whooped the way you did. But two, not a single person, at least in this state, was predicting Indiana to be an absolute undefeated wagon.
No.
And if they win the national championship, I'd like to find the pundit who picked them to win the title.
Nobody did.
Nobody did.
Nationally, locally, even in Indiana, I don't think anybody picked them to win the title
So,
this year.
like, the idea that Oregon can be better or maybe get to the title game next year is certainly a possibility. I also think it's a weird thing to just lean in and say, well, next year's really the year, when in that sport, I don't think that exists anymore.
No, I don't think it does, and I think Oregon's learning that right now because one of the things that Lanning has built for the last 3 years, and it's got to be really painful to see him, they're not immune to it like everybody maybe assumed or thought that they were. Their depth has been decimated over the last couple of days, especially at key positions.
With the portal?
I mean, it's just been nonstop. I think every depth piece on the defensive line that Lanning has slowly accumulated over the last 3 years of recruiting the high school ranks has bounced in the portal. Now, I can't blame the kids for it because when you get all 4 guys up front saying we're coming back, if all 4 guys leave, none of those guys are bouncing and they're potentially looking at starting spots for next year. Mm-hmm. But now you're asking guys who have been on campus for 2 or 3 years, who have been waiting and biding their time, and then you get all these guys back and you're saying, wait a minute, now for another year I got to be a reserve piece or only play 20% of snaps, and so they're going to have a wandering eye. But that's the tough reality now in college football, and they're almost a victim of their own success in terms of recruiting in that regard, that they got a lot of guys who are depth pieces that other teams are going to want. And so the top-end talent's going to be great on the team next year, but the depth is going to take a massive hit. They lost Roger Saliapaga yesterday. They've lost Cooper Perry, who played a lot of snaps at wide receiver this year as a true freshman. So they've had a lot of guys who they allowed to play and play a decent number of snaps this year that have bounced in the portal. And so I don't think it changes the calculus on what the top-end level talent can be for your team. But what we saw from this year's group was the epitome of strength in numbers. They had guys go down and they find a way to win. Linemen go down, you find a way to win. Wide receivers go down. Now they ran into a buzzsaw in Indiana and they didn't have the running backs and they weren't going to win that game likely if those guys were healthy either way. I always try and be careful of doing the next year's the year thing because I think Oregon has reached a point as a program where every year can be the year. Like, I don't think they're falling off. I don't think they're going anywhere. They're going to be in the mix. Now, what they have to figure out is how do we get the last 2% of the marathon? Like, we've run of the 27 miles or whatever a marathon is, we've run 26 of them. Mm-hmm. How do we run that last? That's what they're trying to internally figure out. But they're going to be a good enough base-level talent team, especially with the news of the expanded playoff. They're going to be in the mix every year. So they're like...
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Them not going to the playoff would be an epic disaster.
A 16-team playoff right? And Oregon not in it.
You're going to be in every year. You go 9-3 in the Big Ten, you're going to be likely in the college football playoff, and so the schedule could be more difficult, but you're afforded the ability to lose those games. I understand why internally in that building, this isn't necessarily a fan thing, I think internally in the building, they've eyeballed 2026 because you look at all the young guys. You got 2 freshman running backs who are coming back. Your best wide receiver this year at times was a true freshman coming back. McClellan back. Your best corner and secondary player was a true freshman
Is Stewart
coming
going to
back.
come back?
It's likely going to come back, but he hasn't announced
Okay.
yet. I think it'd be a little foolish to go to the NFL off of a torn labrum when he didn't play a snap, but he's also an interesting character, so I don't know what his driving force is, but I think he likely will be back. So I understand internally why they've identified it that way, but there's no guarantee that the next year all the dominoes fall your way or you stay healthy at the key positions or everything breaks. Like, that's never a guarantee. When you get into the dance, you want to capitalize on your opportunity, and they didn't this year, and that was unfortunate.
And I think that's what's interesting is you get to the semifinals, and the final score certainly lights a fire and I think pushes people to say things that are a little extreme, or maybe they don't really mean, but they're really pissed off, right? Like, if this expands to a 16, which we'll get to this at some point. Heather Dinich basically reported that they're on the verge of it, and if they do 16, there's a chance they're still open to the idea of 24.
Keep going, baby.
You can just be 8-4, and you're going to get in the Big Ten. In the Big Ten, but if they expand to 16 or they keep it at 12, to me doesn't matter. My point is the way that some Duck fans reacted to that loss. If there's any chance where they get a tough, hard matchup just next year in the first round and lose,
right?
I would assume those same people are going to now see the program is sliding. That's going to be, I would assume at that point, that's the takeaway, right? If
we're regressing at this point.
Yeah, if Oregon faces a Miami from this year, whoever's Miami next year, right, in the first game, somehow that's their seed breakdown.
Yeah, you got to go on the road and play somewhere and you fall short.
And you fall just short. That I bet you would also guess that that's going to be some of the thoughts we hear, right? That is Lanning really building this thing in the right way? And that's kind of what I wanted to say is I look at the Big Ten and I wonder with what Dan Lanning has had success-wise, the record speaks for itself. So you have Ohio State's going nowhere, right? They're going to come back and they'll be a juggernaut next year. Their quarterback's going to be another year's season, so I'm sure he's going to get better.
Jeremiah Smith's back. Talk about being decimated in the portal, though. They've had the same thing in Oregon. I think they've lost 29 kids of their depth pieces to the portal. So
right.
It's just happening everywhere in the sport.
It's happening. Yeah.
Nobody's immune to it.
Chris Kleiman literally announced he retired because the portal was going to, in his own words, kill him.
Yeah.
He could not handle losing 80% of his roster every year.
I don't want to do this anymore.
And having to rebuild it every year. He's like, I'm done. I can't do this. The sport is moving past me. But Ohio State's back. Well, Penn State's now made a hire that guys of Josh Pate's status think is a home run hire. I don't know if Rocco Becht is going to scare people, but Penn State we'll see where they're at.
He's a good quarterback.
Michigan is trying to build it in a serious way with professionalism and a dude who has all the seasoning of any coach in that sport.
Yep.
And their quarterback's going to be another year older as well. And so I look at the conference. I assume Indiana's going nowhere now with Mark Cuban announcing he's their daddy. And that coach is a psycho. So you have Indiana, Ohio State already. And then you wonder, is Penn State and Michigan going to take leaps? And that is that's why I throw this out of like, be careful assuming next year is really the year. And I'll say this isn't to deny anybody's reporting or call anybody out. I'm not doing that.
Ooh.
But I also refuse to believe that Dan Lanning operates with a next year's my year mentality.
Yeah, he does not operate that
I
way.
think he's like you. Why can't it be this year?
We're in the Final Four. We got 2 games to win, and we win a national championship.
So it's more about how they build this now this offseason, going into next season, with the idea that Whittingham and Campbell both restore and build some credibility to one team that won the title a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And the other one that's just always in the conversation, but they can't quite get over the hump.
Yeah, I mean, Penn State was a team that was in that same conversation a year ago. Oregon played them in the Big Ten title game, and they beat them. This year seemed like a big win, and then time went on, and we all look back and said, man, that wasn't quite what we thought, but let's give it a little bit of credit. We'll see what happens at both those institutions. I do think it's interesting. Like, Indiana's a fascinating study to me in the years to come because it's a perfect storm of everything coming together. And I think we've all been taken by surprise with how this has worked out for Indiana in year 2. Because last year was a crazy story, but then they weren't good enough clearly in the big games. And this year they're just an unstoppable machine. And we'll see if Miami maybe can change that narrative in a little less than a week. But you're losing a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. They're losing a lot of pieces from this team and a lot of guys who played a lot of football. And so we'll see if they're able to put it all together and be that. I'm not saying Indiana's going to fall off. I'm just saying I don't think Indiana
they might not be undefeated.
It's going to be an undefeated
right?
juggernaut that wins a national championship. Georgia can't do that. that. Ohio State can't do that.
Yeah.
Alabama can't do that. Indiana's not going to be able to do that. They will be a very good team because they have the resources and a very talented head coach, but eventually they'll go through their coordinators getting poached, and they'll have to face some of the same problems other places have. When you look at where Oregon is at, from a roster standpoint, there's not a lot of weaknesses. There's just little areas in which they clearly need to take the next step. And I think the biggest glaring thing for me, and ironically, a player entered the portal last night that I know Oregon's going to be in the mix on, but so will every other school. I feel weird criticizing the unit because they've been up for the award that acknowledges the best in the entire sport. I feel like the offensive line is the biggest thing that keeps them from being a very good team to a national championship level team. Like, you go back to last year, Oregon's offensive line was solid after a slow start. You get into the Ohio State game, and they got beat up at the line of scrimmage on the offensive line. You get into this year's game against Texas Tech. It was jarring how little movement they were able to get. And I know Texas Tech has a great front, but you got to be able to run the football against elite teams. And they couldn't run the football to save their life against Texas Tech, and that was with healthy running backs. Mm-hmm. And then we know how the Indiana game went, and that just was a confusing matchup for them, and they couldn't figure it out. Jordan Seaton entered the portal last night from Colorado.
Yeah, five-star kid.
He's going to be a first-round pick in 2027. The rumors about what that kid's going to command in the NIL market are insane. We're talking like Sam
he's a
Levitt.
left tackle, an elite left tackle. He should get the top dollar
Exactly.
as a quarterback.
And so, I mean, Oregon's going to be one of the teams going after him, but that's like when I circle a group of, Dante certainly fell flat on his face in the biggest moment of this year's season. If he comes back, there's the hope that he develops and takes that next step. And all right, I've been through the fire. Doesn't mean just because you play bad, you can't play good next year. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest position group that I circle in saying, how do you go from where you're at, which is better than literally everybody other than the team winning the title, to being able to win a title yourself? And to me, it starts up front on the offensive line.